ever made homeschool plans, you spent weeks and weeks poring over the different books and curricula you've bought, and you put together this beautiful plan, only to find that a few weeks in, it all falls apart. At this time of year, if you go into Facebook groups or into your WhatsApp groups, you're going to probably find a lot of people talking about their homeschool plans, the planners they're using, their loop schedules, all the things to get ready for the homeschooling year. But you'll also find this undertone, these tongue-in-cheek comments like, well, I know I'm not really going to stick to this. But friends, why are you putting all this effort into planning and then telling yourself you're probably not going to stick to it anyway? If in the past you have struggled to stick to your homeschool plans, or any kind of plans for that matter, today's episode is really going to help you. Let's go.
This is Raising Mums, the podcast that raises up Muslim mums like you so that you can raise your children well. And here's your host, Dr. Gemma.
I'd like to tell you about a workshop that I have coming up this October that I think you're going to love. You know how wonderful home education could be, but you're scared that you're going to fail your kids, and that stops you from creating the life you dream of with your children, a life where your children and you are thriving. And the truth is, the way you feel is the most important factor in your homeschooling success. It's the difference between teaching your children in a way that works for them or wasting loads of money on books and resources that you never use. It's the difference between getting enough sleep so that you can be at your best for your children, or finding yourself glued to the TV or on your phone late into the night. It's the difference between making good decisions for your child's education or being confused. It's the difference between homeschooling them year after year or sending them to school before the year is even over. If you are ready to step into your role as a home educator, to finally unlock your confidence and be the homeschooler who you know you can be, join me for Enough to Homeschool, my 5-day workshop in October. Go to enoughtohomeschool.com and join us. There's a famous saying, a goal without a plan is just a wish. And what is your goal as you home educate your children? That you provide them with this incredible education at home that helps them to achieve their potential, that nurtures their faith and their belief, encourages good character, and there are so many reasons why you began your homeschooling journey. But without a plan, it's just a wish. And yet, despite this, many of us struggle to stick to the plans that we make. And so the first point I want to make in this episode is that it's okay if your plans don't work out. In fact, when you first begin homeschooling, when you first begin your homeschooling year, or if you've been doing this for a long time, but your situation has changed, your children have changed, whatever it is, if your plans don't work, that's okay. And it's to be expected. It takes time to find a plan, a routine, a ritual, whatever you want to call it, that works for your family. If you've never home educated before, how are you going to know how long to make the lessons? How are you going to know the best order to do each subject? How are you going to know how long to stretch the homeschool day to? Which hours of the day are best? How to spread it out. I mean, how are you going to know unless you try? And so the first thing I want to offer you is that instead of expecting your plans to work, I want you to expect them to fail. Hear me out. They will fail the first time, the second time, the third time you try. And that's okay, because it takes time to find the rhythm of your home. It takes time to learn what works for each of your children and what works for you. And by allowing yourself that grace and that freedom to tweak things and change your plans and move things around, you will come upon a plan that truly works for your family situation. And then, and then life will throw something else at you and you'll have to start again and make a new plan. But that's the way it works. So don't expect things from day one, from September 1st or whenever you begin your homeschooling year. Don't expect those plans to all go smoothly. In fact, expect them to fail and expect that you will have to make changes. However, if after a while you still find that you're struggling to keep up with your homeschool plans, you can't stick to them, then perhaps something else is going on. And so that brings me to point number 2. Are your plans out of alignment with your life? Are you being unrealistic in what you can expect yourself or your children to achieve in the day? Are you putting too much into that timetable, too much into your plans? Are you not allowing enough space and movement and flexibility for nappy changes or when the doorbell rings or all the things that life can throw up? It can be very easy when you put pen to paper and you plan things out, especially if you have a very analytical mind. It can be very easy to become a little bit too idealistic and you forget the reality of your life. You forget you have a toddler who causes chaos, that you have, multiple children, or that you have other obligations outside the home. You might forget how long it takes you to prepare the evening meal and all of those things. So have a look at your plan. Are you allowing for the rest of your life? Or have you left space in your plans to catch up if one day somebody was unwell or if something happened which meant you didn't get everything done? Do you have space in your plans to catch up? And really think about this, because I know because you're listening to this podcast, you are an incredibly dedicated mother. You are invested in your child's development, in their education. And so very likely you have high expectations of yourself. And perhaps you have very high expectations of your children. Are you asking too much of yourself and of them? And if that is the case, then look at those plans and consider, are there areas of your homeschool plans that you can just cut out for now? You don't have to eliminate them entirely, but perhaps you can cut down on the number of hours that you do that subject. Perhaps you can postpone doing history this term and start it next term. And the routine and the plans that you have will be unique to you. They won't look like mine, and they won't look like your friends, and they won't look like that influencer on social media. Because we all live different lives. We all have children that work differently. We all have different priorities. And so your homeschool plans should reflect the individuality of your situation and of your children. So take a look at those plans that you can't stick to. Are you expecting too much from yourself, from your children? Are you being unrealistic considering the season of life that you are in right now? And what can you do to make things a little bit easier and give yourself and your children more freedom and flexibility in their days? And if still, after this, you find that you still cannot stick to your plan, then, friends, we have to go a little deeper. You know that I don't like to stick to the superficial. I like to go deep. And homeschool planning is no different. If you consistently are failing to stick to your plans, whether that is homeschooling or something else, then something else is going on. So why can't you stick to your plans? You have tweaked things multiple times to try and find a routine that works. You've cut back on lots of stuff and tried to be more realistic and give yourself a little bit of grace. And yet you find that you just can't stick to the plans that you wrote down. Well, assuming, of course, that you don't have a situation in life that has come up that's unexpected, a difficulty, life has thrown something at you that has thrown you off course. Assuming nothing like that is going on, then we have to turn inward. Do you find yourself thinking thoughts like, I'm just not someone who can stick to a plan. I don't like planning. I like to have more freedom. I never finish things. I never follow through. Is it any wonder if you're thinking thoughts like that you can't stick to your plans? Look at those I am statements. Look at the statements you tell yourself about who you are and the sort of person you are. Are you telling yourself that I am a person who does what they've committed to doing, who follows through on their plans? Or are you someone who tells themselves, I can never be consistent, I'm lazy, I'm this, I'm that? Have a look at the way you think. Have a look at the identity you've given yourself. Now, this might seem a little bit woo-woo and a little bit perhaps too deep for some of you. But hear me out, because if you're consistently failing to follow through on things, particularly with your homeschool plans, even when it's about something as important as your child's education, something needs to be done. And the thing that perhaps needs to change is your identity. And I'm laughing a little bit as I record this podcast because I know that some of you will be surprised that this podcast has taken this route. But let's be real. The way that you live your life, day in, day out, the decisions you make, even down to the decision on what you're going to do. Are you going to follow what you had planned, or are you going to do what you feel like doing in the moment? That simple decision of following your whims or following your plan comes down to your identity. And so often, so many of us, we think that who we are is fixed, that we can't change it. We look at our past and use that as proof for who we are. We tell ourselves, well, remember that time you said you were going to do this, you promised you were going to do that, and you never did it. Remember that time you made that plan and you never even looked at it. Remember that time you did this and this happened. We look at our past to inform who we are. But the truth is that what has passed has gone, and who you are right now is what matters. And you get to decide today to become the sort of mother who sticks to her plans. Now, that doesn't mean you can't have a day off. It doesn't mean that when you're unwell or something comes up, you can't prioritize that instead of your plans. Of course you can. But when you have given your plans value, when you have given yourself and what you're doing, but what I mean is the fact that so many of you cannot stick to your plans means that you don't value them. And what underlies that is that you don't value the decisions that you made. And what underlies that, perhaps you don't value yourself. So we have to look really deep if you are consistently failing to meet your plans at who you identify as. And I'm laughing a little bit as I record this podcast because I know that some of you will be surprised that this podcast has taken this route. But let's be real. The way that you live your life, day in, day out, the decisions you make, even down to the decision on what you're going to do. Are you going to follow what you had planned, or are you going to do what you feel like doing in the moment? That simple decision of following your whims or following your plan comes down to your identity. And so often, so many of us, we think that who we are is fixed, that we can't change it. We look at our past and use that as proof for who we are. We tell ourselves, well, remember that time you said you were going to do this, you promised you were going to do that, and you never did it. Remember that time you made that plan and you never even looked at it. Remember that time you did this and this happened. We look at our past to inform who we are. But the truth is that what has passed has gone, and who you are right now is what matters. And you get to decide today to become the sort of mother who sticks to her plans. Now, that doesn't mean you can't have a day off. It doesn't mean that when you're unwell or something comes up, you can't prioritize that instead of your plans. Of course you can. But when you have given your plans value, when you have given yourself and what you're doing. But what I mean is the fact that so many of you cannot stick to your plans means that you don't value them. And what underlies that is that you don't value the decisions that you made. And what underlies that? Perhaps you don't value yourself. So we have to look really deep if you are consistently failing to meet your plans at who you identify as. We have to look at your self-image, at your identity. When you began homeschooling, when you first started and you envisioned the sort of mother you would be, the sort of home educator you would be, who was that? Think back. You were the mother who got up early and prepared breakfast for her kids. She is the sort of woman who has fun with her kids, who enjoys educating them at home. She's also the kind of woman who plans and sticks to her plans, who had her homeschool supplies organised, who had a plan for the day. You are also in that vision of yourself, the sort of mother who, when a difficulty rose up, something unexpected happened, you were able to take it in your stride, to greet these difficulties with a smile on your face. You were both relaxed and you had structure. And that relaxed yet organised atmosphere in your home was something that you envisioned would be necessary to create a beautiful education for your children. That was the identity you were hoping for. But instead of living up to that image of yourself in the future, you have allowed the past to inform who you are today. So I hope you enjoyed that episode. Quick recap. If you cannot stick to your plans, first of all, expect that to happen. Expect failure the first few times. It's going to take time to find a rhythm and routine that works for your family. The second thing, are you being unrealistic? Are you expecting too much? Or have you not added enough flexibility and grace into your plans? And thirdly, look deep. Who do you identify yourself as? Are you someone who honours their commitments and sticks to their plans? Or do you identify as someone who doesn't? And if it's the latter, good news. Identity is something that you can change. And I'll be going into that in much more detail in my upcoming workshop, Enough to Homeschool. If you are ready to become the sort of woman who can stick to her plans, who can homeschool her children unapologetically, with confidence, and with a belief in what she's doing, if you're ready to step into your role as a home educator, I hope you will join me this October for Enough to Homeschool. The link for that is in the show notes. Thank you so much for joining me here today, everyone. Have a beautiful week. Assalamu alaikum.